My name is Eleanor Price. I am 31 years old. And this is the story of how being the reliable one cost me everything I built and taught me. Exactly who my family was. Willing to sacrifice when things got hard. The sentence that changed my life did not come wrapped in anger or cruelty. It came dressed as practically, spoken calmly over a Sunday dinner like a fact everyone had already agreed on. You don't really need it, my father said, carving into his steak as if he weren't cutting straight through years of my work. Your brother needs stability more than you do. At the time, it sounded reasonable. Logical, even. I nodded. I smiled. I swallowed something sharp and metallic and told myself that strong people adapt. What I didn't realize was that the moment I agreed, I became the easiest thing in the room to give away. I didn't inherit my success. I built it piece by piece in cities that never cared whether I survived or not. At 22, I moved to Chicago with 2 suitcases. I half-paid internship in data analytics, and a credit card already begging for mercy. I slept on a futon so thin it felt like the floor was mocking me. I worked days crunching numbers for companies that barely knew my name and nights freelancing for startups that paid late and promised exposure instead of money. I learned early that exhaustion was a currency. If you spent enough of it, people took you seriously. By 26, I had carved out a niche. I could take chaotic systems and make them make sense. I could find leaks, inefficiencies, quiet disasters waiting to explode. Companies hired me when things were already on fire. By 29, I had my own consulting firm. Nothing flashy, no marble lobbies or motivational posters, just results. Clients stayed because I fixed what others missed. Money followed. Respect followed, the kind of reputation that doesn't need defending because it speaks for itself. When my parents talked about me to their friends, they bragged. Eleanor's brilliant, my mother would say. She's always been so capable. Capable was their favorite word. It sounded like praise, but it functioned more like a label slapped on a box. Can handle pressure. Requires less care. My younger brother, Mark, was different. Sensitive, restless, always on the edge of something not working out. My parents explained his failures gently. He just hasn't found his footing yet. When he dropped out of business school, it was because the environment was toxic. When his startup collapsed, it was because his partners didn't believe in him. When debts followed him like shadows, they were temporary. Life happens. Somehow, life only happened to him. I learned to make myself smaller during family gatherings, to downplay wins so his losses wouldn't feel louder. Strength, I learned, made other people comfortable asking you to shrink. So, when my father said I didn't need it, and my mother nodded in agreement, I didn't argue. I didn't yet understand that what they were offering my brother wasn't support. It was my future, neatly repackaged as fairness. The thing they wanted me to give up wasn't money at first, it was control. Quietly, gradually, under the guise of helping family. My firm had started working closely with my father's logistics company, modernizing their systems, fixing inefficiencies that had been bleeding them dry for years. The turnaround was dramatic. Profits stabilized. Investors relaxed. My parents began talking about synergy and long-term vision. They loved the idea of family intertwined with success, especially when the success came from me and the credit could be shared. Then Mark needed a job. Not just any job. A role, a title, something respectable enough to explain the years he had lost. My parents suggested he join the firm. He'll learn from you, my mother said. You're such a good influence. Against my better judgment, I agreed. I gave him a position that mattered, but not one that could hurt anything if he failed. I told myself this was what family did. You make room. You give chances. At first, it was fine. Mark showed up late but talked confidently. He sat in meetings, nodding, repeating my points with different words. Clients liked him. He had charm. He also had no follow-through. Deadlines slipped. Emails went unanswered. I caught mistakes quietly and fixed them before anyone noticed. It felt familiar, like childhood all over again. Me cleaning up messes so no one had to feel uncomfortable. Then my parents suggested something bigger, a restructure. Why not fold everything under one umbrella? My father said. Legacy planning, he liked that phrase, made him sound thoughtful instead of opportunistic. They wanted to integrate my firm more deeply into the family business. Shared accounts, shared branding, shared decision-making, and shared control. It protects everyone, my mother insisted, especially Mark. I asked practical questions, legal questions, financial questions. They brushed them aside with emotion. Don't be so cold. This is family. Why are you acting like we're strangers? The irony almost made me laugh, because strangers wouldn't have dared ask this of me. Strangers would have negotiated. My family assumed. The breaking moment came during a meeting I wasn't supposed to attend. I walked past my father's office early one morning and heard my name. I paused. Inside, my parents and Mark were discussing a loan. A large one, leveraging assets tied directly to systems I had built. Eleanor's firm guarantees stability, my father said confidently. Investors trust her, my brother laughed. She won't say no. She never does. I didn't confront them right away. I went back to my office and pulled documents. Dates didn't line up. Approvals appeared without my signature. My name was referenced in commitments I had never made. It felt like watching someone else wear your skin to get what they wanted. Still, when my parents finally sat me down and explained the plan, they framed it as protection. Mark needs something solid, my mother said. You're strong enough to rebuild if things go wrong. There it was again. That sentence. You're strong enough. What they meant was simpler. You're expendable. I wish I could say I stormed out, that I threw papers across the room and demanded justice. But betrayal doesn't always trigger fireworks. Sometimes it triggers clarity. I listened. I asked questions. I took notes. And I realized something unsettling. This wasn't impulsive. It was strategic. They had already decided who mattered more when resources were limited. They had already decided whose dreams were flexible and whose fragility required protection. When I refused to sign additional guarantees, the mood changed. My father became distant. My mother became emotional. Mark became defensive. Why are you making this so hard? He asked, as if I were the obstacle standing between him and the life he deserved. I told them I would step back, remove myself cleanly, untangle my firm from theirs. I would not block their plans, but I would not fund them either. Silence followed. Then disappointment. Then guilt. They acted like I had abandoned them in the middle of a storm they themselves had summoned. Within weeks, things started unraveling. Clients noticed the difference. Projects stalled. Investors asked questions. Systems failed without constant oversight. My parents called more often. I first casually, then urgently. Can you just look at this? Can you talk to them? They trust you. I said no. Every time. Not angrily, calmly, firmly. Each refusal felt like reclaiming oxygen. The final call came late one night. My mother was crying. The bank was nervous. The loan terms were tightening. Mark was overwhelmed. You're the only one who can fix this, she said. I closed my eyes and pictured the version of myself they had always relied on, tired, capable, silently resentful, showing up anyway. Then I pictured the life I was finally building without being siphoned dry. I won't, I said. She called me heartless, said family didn't abandon family. I didn't argue. I had learned that people who benefit from your silence call boundaries cruelty. When the company collapsed months later, they blamed market conditions. Bad luck, anyone but themselves. I watched from a distance as legal consequences followed. As relationships fractured, as my brother, finally facing consequences without a net, had to grow up or fall apart, I didn't celebrate. I didn't gloat. I simply continued living a life that no longer required me to be the strongest person in every room. Today, my firm is smaller and sharper. Fewer clients, better work, no shared accounts, no emotional debts disguised as love. My parents and I speak occasionally, carefully. They, still don't understand my choice. Maybe they never will, but I understand it now, and that's enough. Strength is not the obligation to save people from the outcomes of their decisions. It is the ability to walk away when love is being used as leverage. If you are always the one who survives, people will assume you can survive being sacrificed too. And that assumption ends the moment you stop agreeing to it. People assume the hardest part of walking away is the loss. It isn't. The hardest part is resisting the instinct to explain yourself. To people who benefit from misunderstanding you, after my family's business imploded, rumors began circulating in the industry. Some subtle, some cruel. That I had panicked under pressure, that I had abandoned my own blood when things got tough, that I was brilliant but emotionally cold. I heard them secondhand at conferences, in half pauses during phone calls, in the careful way people phrased questions. Are you still independent? That situation with your family must have been complicated. Complicated is a polite way of asking whether I could be trusted or whether I would disappear again. I learned to let the silence do its work. I did not correct every lie. I did not issue statements. I did not defend my character in rooms where it had already been decided. Instead, I focused on building something that spoke louder than gossip. I took on fewer projects, but made them precise, clean, profitable. I became selective to the point of discomfort. No rushed timelines. No emotional discounts. No vague scopes that could be twisted later. Clients who balked at boundaries weren't my clients anymore. That alone filtered out more chaos than any strategy ever had. Months passed, then a year. Slowly, something shifted. The same people who had whispered started, calling quietly, tentatively, we've been watching what you're doing, they said. It's different. They meant disciplined, predictable, safe, in an industry addicted to drama and heroics. I had built something boring in the best way. Reliable results without spectacle. The kind of work investors like, the kind that survives downturns. One afternoon, I received an email from a former client of my parents' company. Short, direct, we lost a lot of money trusting the wrong people. We should have followed you. I stared at the screen for a long time before replying. I didn't say I told you so. I didn't say anything about my family at all. I simply said if you want to talk about future work, I'm open. That was the moment I understood something critical. Revenge did not require confrontation. It required contrast. Every time I showed up prepared, ethical, and consistent, it quietly highlighted what had been missing before. I wasn't punishing anyone. I was removing the cover their behavior had hidden behind. My parents stopped calling as often, not because they no longer needed help, but because they had finally learned I would not provide it. Distance replaced entitlement. For the first time, our relationship existed without extraction. It was thinner, but it was real. 2 years after everything fell apart, I ran into my brother at a mutual acquaintance's wedding. It wasn't dramatic. No shouting, no accusations, just an unexpected collision near the bar while waiting for drinks. He looked older. Not wiser exactly, but worn in a way I hadn't seen before. Consequences will do that. We exchanged pleasantries, like strangers who shared a childhood, but no longer shared a script. I heard you're doing well, he said finally. There was no bitterness in his voice. Just fatigue. I am, I replied, and for once it didn't feel like a defensive statement. He nodded slowly. I didn't realize how much. You held together until it was gone. The sentence hung between us, heavier than any apology. I waited. He didn't say sorry. Maybe he didn't know how. Maybe he thought acknowledgement was enough. For the first time, I didn't rush to bridge the gap for him. I hope you're figuring things out, I said. And I meant it. Growth born from collapse is still growth. That night, driving home, I thought about how often women like me are raised to confuse resilience with obligation, how being capable becomes an excuse for others not to be. My family hadn't been uniquely cruel. They were ordinary people operating under a common delusion that the strongest person in the room exists to absorb impact so everyone else doesn't have to. But strength doesn't mean infinite capacity. It means knowing when to stop carrying what was never yours. Success, real success, is quieter than people expect. There was no moment where I felt victorious. No headline, no cinematic payoff, just stability, peace, predictable sleep. Contracts that didn't make my stomach twist. Relationships that didn't require self-erasure as the entry fee. I hired slowly, promoted carefully, paid people well. When my team made mistakes, we addressed them without panic, without blame. No one was expected to bleed for the business. The irony wasn't lost on me. I had built the kind of environment I had always protected others in, but had never been allowed to occupy myself. Occasionally, someone would ask if I regretted not stepping in when my family's company collapsed. If I wished I had saved it, the question always revealed more about the asker than about me. People romanticize sacrifice when they are not the ones being sacrificed. I do not regret walking away. I regret how long it took me to realize I was allowed to. If you take anything from this story, let it be this: being the strong one is not a moral contract. It does not mean you are required to fix what others break, finance what others mismanage, or forgive what others refuse to acknowledge. I did not destroy my family. I simply stopped holding up a structure that was collapsing because it was built on entitlement instead of accountability. Sometimes the most powerful revenge is not retaliation. It is refusal. Refusal to play the role they wrote for you. Refusal to be the background support for someone else's life. Refusal to confuse love with access. I am still strong. I just belong to myself now.